Hey everybody, just wanted to take a little bit of time to comment on the discussion that's been going on online through weeks 9 and 10 related to labeling ableism and talking about different labels we use, and then also some ideas about PTSD. And something that I think is important that a lot of people mention but bears repeating is the idea that everyone deals with some level of trauma in their lives. It's just how many layers of trauma are you dealing with, and how many of your social identities help contribute to that trauma. So people in privileged situations may have had to deal with less trauma, but it's still difficult, right? It's important to remember that privilege doesn't necessarily mean easy. It just might mean a little bit easier. And something else too, in particular for PTSD related to veterans and people in the military, the difference between civilian life in the U.S., which is mainly pretty safe and relaxed, is hard to step out of those survival instincts and the training that was developed in order to deal with high stress situations and possibly chaotic situations. And so when soldiers come back, it's like a day difference between where they were and where they are when they come back, and it's a really difficult adjustment for a lot of people. But I think it said something around 30% of people returning from war suffer from some sort of fairly severe post-traumatic stress disorder. And I think it's important to think about the idea of maybe even not calling it a disorder, right? Stress and trauma are ways that your body and your mind deal with extraordinarily difficult situations. And so it might be wise for us to start even talking about situations of trauma as just a normal part of life that need to be worked through and need to be supported, because we all deal with stuff. And then I think in particular the military culture of toughness sometimes goes against that, right? And that there might be this idea of being tough both mentally and physically in the military, and that helps people do their jobs, but also at the same time it may prevent them or deter them from seeking help that they might need. So it's really important to help support the people around us who may have served and may be dealing with some things that they're not necessarily willing to talk about yet. Something else related to the idea of labels is that language is important because it leads to behavioral change and can even lead to societal change depending on who's talking. So take a look at our current president's rhetorical style. A lot of it has to do with kind of demeaning and insulting people sometimes, and I think that's going to have a long-lasting effect. There's other things that he said that are fine, that are innocuous, that are supportive of people, but through his Twitter account in particular, it is a rhetoric and a pattern of insulting people and lashing out, and I'm curious how that's going to affect society in the long run if that becomes kind of the norm. So if you take a look at some of the things that he said, our president has made fun of people with disabilities very directly in this campaign. He has said some very sexist things, particularly the grab him by the P word. That wasn't during the campaign, it was something previous. But it is problematic as it invites other people to do the same kinds of things. So what we need to think about a lot, I think, is the idea of empathy, and particularly, people arriving after a traumatic experience, whether it's people in the military or whether it's refugees. We need to kind of understand that there's similar experiences of trauma that we may not have experienced. Also, I think labeling has to do with the changing nature of words. Words constantly change meaning, and some of them eventually become a little more offensive because they start to be used in negative contexts. So what I would recommend is talking to people who if somebody has a disability, or if somebody is a different race or a different religion or something like that, talk to them and ask them what kinds of words they're okay with, and then also understand that that's an individual preference, and that individual preference might be different for every person. And so it's really important to try to get to know people, and that is one of the problematics of labels, is that they try to help us simplify language, but sometimes they oversimplify language, and it's a constant battle. So something that I recommend is, people who maybe feel like other people are too sensitive these days, is, be open to being corrected, and don't take it in a negative way. Now, also, people who are doing the correcting and asking for certain labels also understand that other people might be coming from a different background and don't understand much about certain situations. So the idea of political correctness is a good one if it's not overdone. It gets people to think critically about what they're saying, and not to assume that they think they know what other people believe. But at the same time, it can become just used as a weapon to shut people up. So when does political correctness go too far, and when is it useful, is a really good question to ask, because it has been very useful in some ways, but it also has stifled free speech occasionally. So pay attention to when it's doing both of those things. And that's about all I have to say. Oh wait, somebody mentioned the idea of intent means everything. And actually, I have to disagree with that slightly. That, like, if you intend something in a certain way, but you said it wrong, it is up to you to listen to the critique and then try to figure out a different or more thoughtful way of saying things. So yes, intention is good, and then clarifying intention afterwards and maybe changing how you say things is a really valuable tool as well. That's all I have to say, and enjoy the week.